Oh, welcome, time travelers, and welcome, new time travelers. As always, if you're new to this channel and enjoy not only learning about U.S. history, but historical events from around the world, don't forget to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it. Today we're going to start in 1570 when Pope Pius V excommunicated Queen Elizabeth I of England from the Roman Catholic Church. 1870 is when American clergyman, educator, and politician Herman Rhodes Revels was sworn into the U.S. Senate, becoming the first African American to serve in the U.S. Congress. 1913 brought us the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which permitted a federal income tax, went into effect. 4 years later, in 1917, English novelist and critic Anthony Burgess, whose fictional explorations of non-modern delicacies, combat, wit, moral earnestness, and note of bizarre was born. 1938 is when U.S. again notified Japan it will be held responsible for injuries to Americans and damage to their properties inflicted by a Japanese force in China. 1939 brought us royal letters patent that were proclaimed, gaining a new constitution to Melita. 1943, British musician George Harrison, the lead guitarist of the Beatles, one of the most important and influential bands in the history of rock and roll, was born. 2 years later, in 1945, Red Army troops captured Precocious, Finland, and a big drive towards the Baltic coast of Pomerania. Moving on to 1948, when the communists seized control of the government of Czechoslovakia. The following year, in 1949, James G. McDonald, U.S. Representative in Tel Aviv, Israel, was appointed first U.S. ambassador to Israel by President Harry S. Truman. On this day, in 1956, the 12th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union came to close after First Secretary Nikita S. Khrushchev delivered a secret speech denouncing the late Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. The following year, in 1957, the U.S. Supreme Court held in a 6-3 decision that professional football is subject to federal antitrust laws. We're going to make a brief stop in 1964 when American boxer Muhammad Ali, known at the time as Cassius Clay, became the world heavyweight champion by knocking out Sonny Liston in 7 rounds. Now, a brief stop in 1970 when the U.S. Supreme Court held that one-man vote principle applied to school boards and other local elections. On this day in 1986, Philippine President Ferdinand E. Marcos, under pressure from the U.S., fled his country for Hawaii after a fraudulent electoral victory over Cornelius Aquino, who replaced him as president. 2 years later, in 1988, Roh Tae-woo became president of the Republic of Korea's Sixth Republic during a ceremony at the National Assembly in Seoul. He replaced Chun Dee-hwan, who did not run for re-election in December of 1987. It was the first peaceful transfer of power since Syngman Rhee, the first president of independent Korea, took office in 1948. Roh promised that privilege and corruption would not be tolerated during his 5-year term. The following day, the government granted amnesty to 7,234 people, 1,731 of whom were political detainees. On February 11th, the president-elect had named Lee Han-jae as prime minister. 2001 brought us Australian cricketer Don Bodman, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the game, and often judged the greatest player of the 20th century, passed away at the age of 92. Now, in 2009, Pakistan's Supreme Court ruled that Nawaz Sharif is ineligible to hold elective office. And with that, we return to 2024 and our current history. Let's see what this year has in store for us. Until then.